Today I'm going to be walking across the entire Upper Peninsula of Michigan without stopping. That means no sitting down, no leaning against a tree, and definitely no sleeping, until I've made it 50 miles, all the way to Lake Superior. The time is currently 7:23 a.m. Let's get going. But first, let's give a bit of background. My name's Mickey, and I explore abandoned places. Old mines, closed factories, whatever this is. Most of these adventures start off something like this. I began the 2-mile walk, trudging through a long walk to the... So I wondered, what would an actual long walk be like? But I didn't have 6 months to spend walking across the Appalachian Trail, so I decided on a simpler goal. I was going to walk across an entire state in less than 24 hours, with no breaks. A true, continuous long walk. And after a bit of planning, I decided on Michigan, specifically the UP, as the ideal setting for this adventure. The day started out like a dream. I wasn't as well rested as I would have liked, but I felt content, oblivious to the weight of the journey before me. I quickly woke up from that dream. You see, they don't exactly design trails for this sort of thing, so if I was going to make it in under 24 hours, I needed to plan my own route. And after some research, I figured it out. The journey now came out to an even 50 miles, but it did mean I was in for a rather unglamorous start. Fortunately, it wasn't long before I made it to my first section of trail. 8 miles of secluded footpaths, stunning fall scenery all around, the crisp autumn air on my face. I was back to living the dream. It was still pretty cold outside, but I was already working up a sweat. I wasn't going to win any style points with this outfit, but I figured I needed every ounce of comfort I could muster on a journey like this, especially after what happened to my knee only a few weeks ago. I passed the time counting cars.
Well, that's car number 4.
It wasn't exactly the most consistent pastime. I soon decided to dump a liter of water. Let me explain. When I first thought of this trip, I envisioned it quite differently. Back then, it was still really hot outside, and 50 miles was really far, so I was going to need to carry water. A lot of water. 12 liters of this stuff. Do you have any idea how much this weighs? Well, I did the math, and it's about way too much. So it changed my plan. I'd stash 2 gallons of water along the route, allowing me to carry significantly less water in my pack. Yet, some part of me still held on to that foolish desire to carry too much. As I marched forward, all the wonders of the forest continued to amaze me. From the thriving communities of lichen below, to all the undergrowth above them, and even the giants which looked down on us all. That's funny, what's a Jeep doing on the... Oh wait, I wasn't on the trail anymore. In fact, I was nearly a quarter of a mile away from it. Nothing a little more walking can't solve. Still, it was a bit tougher knowing all of this energy was for nothing. Eventually I made it back to the gate that had led me astray. Now we were back to business. On and on I went, passing through many beautiful sights and glorious views. But I was on a mission, and no matter how pretty the sight, the clock never stops ticking. I only had 40 miles to go at 4 hours in, but little did I know the distance shown on my GPS was completely wrong. Just then, a sharp pain shot through my left leg. My knee injury was back. The fiery pain ran up my IT band every time I extended my leg just a bit too far, which was especially bad when going downhill. I took an ibuprofen to ease the inflammation. This was going to be a long day. I could already hear the roar of the largest highway I'd cross all day, signifying my departure from the trail, and the beginning of my 13-mile shortcut on roads. The first road, really more of an ATV trail, ran parallel to the highway, a drastic change to the sounds of the woods that I'd grown accustomed to, and it stretched on and on and on. I could just keep walking until I faded away into nothing. And even then, I still wouldn't be there. Don't get me wrong, there were some nice parts along the way, but I wasn't exactly going to miss this road when it was over. Finally, I reached the next turn. Only 11.7 more miles of road to go. I now found myself walking past groups of secluded homes, some of which were well past their prime. But one thing stood out among all of them. They definitely weren't used to seeing any visitors. Eventually, the wide road began to be whittled away, pushed back by all of the surrounding forest, until it was little more than my personal footpath. It was like I'd gone back in time to just a few hours earlier. The leaves were shining brightly as ever, and there were marvelous sights to be seen all around. Except it wasn't this morning. It was 2:13 p.m., and I now had 15 miles under my belt. I wasn't even a third of the way there. Yet I could already feel the earliest stages of fatigue creeping up. My knee was hurting, and worst of all, I felt something else. It'd been gnawing at me for some time now. I desperately tried to ignore it. Just then, I was brought back to reality, and the truck had brought with it the whole rest of the world. I was now back to the mind-numbingly straight roads that slowly fed on my soul. The monotony was broken up by stories, told by the seldom visited places along the road. A quaint little cemetery that was still maintained, a family who had moved on long ago, and beyond that, fields that I could get lost in for days. Sometimes it wasn't enough just to see these things, but my path was already decided, written in stone, along with all of the joys and misery that came with it. I switched to the right side of the road to reduce the movement of my left knee. I was getting close to my first water stash now, which supposedly marked 19.5 miles completed. Although according to my GPS, I've already gone farther than that. These water stashes are crucial to my success. I had to be sure that no one else could find them, so I used the oldest trick in the book. And with that, it was back to knocking off miles. 21, 22. Wait a second. So basically when I made the route for my GPS, I forgot to extend it all the way to the end. So let's try this again. I saw some trees, some leaves, some road, but then I saw some more trees, leaves, and road. Trees, leaves, road, trees, leaves, road, trees, leaves, road, trees, leaves, road, until finally I made it back to the trail. I mailed up my dying wishes and pushed on into the evening light. And then it happened. I made it to 25 miles, halfway there. But now with the milestone behind me, I quickly realized that I still had an incredibly long journey ahead of me. The end was still too far away to even feel real. All I knew was walking, and all I had to look forward to was more walking. Somehow the silence of the woods had been amplified tenfold. Everywhere I looked stared back at me with an emptiness I had never known before. It felt like the whole forest knew something I didn't, but no one dared to warn me what it was. As the sun continued to fall, I walked around a campsite that was literally blocking the trail. Although to be fair, I don't think they were expecting any visitors. Darkness slowly lowered itself onto me like a tomb being sealed up. This was my life now. Permanent tunnel vision. Well, except for when I have to light up the whole forest for another shot. I munched on some Skittles to vary it up from the usual granola bars. They were surprisingly edible. You'd think after 27 miles of walking that I'd be famished, but that's simply not the case. I'd read online that loss of appetite is common among ultra-distance runners. Eating was only going to become more of a chore as the night dragged on. I realized I'd wandered off the trail by about 300 feet as the crow flies. So of course, I did the reasonable thing and backtracked until I made it. I decided to take the shortest path to save time. What could happen in only 300 feet? Well, I soon found I was passing through wetlands, so I'd have to be careful not to... Did you hear that? That was the sound of the universe playing a practical joke on me. I managed to make it out of there with only 1.5 of my shoes completely soaked. Don't worry, I'm sure they'll have time to dry over the next 10 hours. A few minutes later, my knee cried out in pain. Things were not looking good. I upped my ibuprofen dosage to 1 every 3 hours, and I pushed onward, with my IT band fighting every single step. Mile marker 32 could not come fast enough. For the first time, I had to face the fear that had been growing within me. What if I couldn't do this? What if it had all been for nothing? Eventually, the inflammation in my knee died down, but my mind still desperately wanted to stop. I just had to keep going, tricking myself with small goals, because the bigger picture was too much for me to handle. Wait, what was that? Oh my goodness, it's a porcupine. Well, I was too tired to express my emotions. I can't tell you how much this lifted my spirits. Unfortunately, my nighttime friend didn't get the memo that I was trying to pass him, so I continued walking behind him until he finally scurried off the trail. After that, the miles started going by much faster, across open fields, through foggy wetlands, and along old railroad tracks, until finally I was in reach of my next major milestone, the second water drop. As I approached the intersection where I'd stashed the water only a day prior, I realized someone else had been there today. That sign was laying flat on the ground only 24 hours ago. I hurried over to where I'd hidden the stash. Thankfully, my impeccable camouflage skills had paid off. I threw on another jacket, and with peanut M&Ms in hand, I marched on to the last major highway I'd cross. Almost immediately after, I was hit with the worst section of rolling hills I'd faced yet. I just needed to push through it and try to make it through as quickly as I could. Except little did I know, the end of these hills was about 13 miles away. Now on a normal day, this would just be a fairly standard hike. But after 36 miles, these steep hills were killer, and I had no clue how long they would last. Eventually I just had to accept that this was my fate for the rest of the night. With about 13 miles to go, I felt absolutely terrible. The peanut M&Ms tasted like cardboard. I felt feverish, and the hills ensured I barely had a chance to catch my breath. It took every fiber of my being to resist the urge to stop. I only stood still when I needed to get something out of my pack, or shoot some more video, never to take a rest. I still had about 12 miles to go, which even though I was over 75% of the way there, felt very demotivating. 12 miles still meant roughly 4 to 5 more hours of this, and I wasn't sure if I could do that. But still I pushed onward, taking it 1 mile at a time, because any more than that was just too much to think about. Getting to single digits helped, especially 9 miles to go, which meant I had only a bit over 3 hours left. I started counting mile markers in terms of how many I had left, but things didn't magically get any easier crossing that imaginary line. In fact, they got much, much harder. I don't even know what I would have done if I had seen this elevation chart. I checked my GPS often, usually wondering how it was possible that I was still nowhere close to the next mile marker. Little by little, I pushed through, forcing food and water down as often as I could. Getting from mile 8 to 7 proved to be one of the hardest, and getting to my next major milestone of 6 proved to be no easy task either. But then I finally caught the break I was looking for. A decent stretch of largely flat land, and a tangible amount of time left. I was averaging 25-minute miles at this point, a big improvement from the rolling hills, but little did I know, I still had a lot of elevation to lose before I made it to the lakeshore. Descent is usually easier, but when you're nursing an injured knee, it's much, much worse. My pace slowed a lot when the trail became a literal creek. Fortunately, I was forced into a faster solution. The boardwalk literally sank into water up to my ankles.
Great.
My shoes were both completely soaked, but I had faith that I'd be able to make it the last 2 miles before anything bad happened. The last 1.5 mile stretch was very peaceful. The waves were beside me the entire time, but I was unable to visit them until I finally made it to my pickup spot. Luckily, you know what they say, time flies when you're on the 49th mile of your 50-mile walk. Words cannot describe how happy I was to be here. I rushed out onto the beach to greet the waves. I'd never felt so excited to see them before, but I still had one more goal I needed to accomplish. The calculated distance from start to finish came out just shy of 50 miles, so I marched on one last time to add an extra mile, just to be sure. And at 6:14, I officially claimed the 50-mile prize, just shy of 23 hours. There was nothing particularly special about this spot. The trail had faded into little more than a narrow stretch of beach, but I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. This video took a lot of time and effort to create, so be sure to subscribe to the channel, it really helps me out. And I'll see you in the next adventure.
Well, that's the first car I've seen down this road.